The Tom Woods Show, episode 1914.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. Well, today is our third and final episode, talking to Brian McClanahan about his brand new book, The Jeffersonian Tradition. So we're going to dig into that and cover a bunch of, let's say, disparate topics in what we might call rather a potpourri episode. So Brian, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, let's dig right back in here. I asked you off the air about one of the chapters in this book, and that when you released it as an essay, apparently it was very controversial, which is why I want to start out by talking about it. And that is Pope Francis and the Southern tradition.
Sure.
Now, let me say something here first. I've done a couple of episodes on Pope Francis. You can, if you go to tomspodcast.com and you do a search and page for Francis, you'll find a couple of episodes on it. And there I've focused entirely on his economic comments, but there's way, way more that can be said. Although I suppose I've had a couple of guests on to talk about him too, and we went into some theological things. But I mean, I don't care if you're a Catholic or not. Pope Francis is open to criticism. That is absolutely legitimate. And if you're going to tell me you can't criticize the Pope, then you just don't know what you're talking about. You absolutely do not know what you're talking about. Thomas Aquinas makes this clear in his work that you can do that. Pope Francis himself got on the phone, called up one of his critics in Italy and thanked him and said that I don't need yes men all the time. Sometimes I need people to tell me if I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. Okay, well, so now you're telling me you're better than Pope Francis himself, the very guy you're defending? I mean, come on, the whole thing's ridiculous. And the man's a walking scandal. Anyone without a lobotomy can see that. And you're not helping. You're definitely not helping the situation by making it seem as if to be a good Catholic, you have to get a lobotomy and pretend that the evidence of your senses is not actually there. So I could go into a lot of detail about this. I don't really want to. I find it demoralizing and frustrating. The guy is a wrecking ball dedicated to your destruction. I'm just going to put it that way. The guy loathes everything you love, despises everything you love. He hates it. And now he's trying to go after the old Latin Mass, which was loved by all Catholics for 1,500 plus years. He's going to go after that because he wants more hootenannies and felt banners and hymns from the 1970s in your parish. You know, the man's a wrecking ball. I felt the need to preface my question to you with that, so people don't think I've gone soft. No, to the contrary, Woods is as hardcore as ever. But I am going to let you have a word, let's say, for Pope Francis. So here we go. What are you talking about in Pope Francis and the Southern tradition?
Right. Well, I mean, what I said in this essay, and it's the last essay in the book, Pope Francis and the Southern Tradition, all you said is true. I was simply trying to put some things in context. And so when you look at some of the comments he's made on, say, labor or the environment, some of these things, which in some ways, I mean, look, as Christians, you could all say, well, we should be good stewards of the environment, right? I mean, this in the Southern tradition certainly has that element to it. And so my point was, well, I mean, if we want to think about environmentalism and what that really means, should we be thinking about this like the left does, which is almost an earth worship, a pagan type of earth worship, or should it be, well, let's be good stewards of the environment and try to do what we can to maintain, you know, we all like gardens and we like natural resources and we like these things. And I pointed out that the Southern tradition had a lot in common with that, whether it was Richard Weaver, whether it was John Taylor of Caroline, Wendell Berry, the fugitive agrarians. And I bring up, you know, Callaway Gardens, which I know you've been to before. We actually had an event there. Ron Paul had it was a Ron Paul event at Callaway Gardens.
Well, I know we had a Mises Institute event at Callaway Gardens, without a doubt.
Yeah, so that was at Callaway Gardens. Well, that was the whole idea of Callaway Gardens, was to show that private individuals could conserve the environment. It's beautiful when you think about it, because we have this conservation ethic, which is only the government can preserve the environment. And that way, Francis is getting off track, because he does put a lot of pressure on governments to do this. But from an individual standpoint, the Callaways were interested in ensuring that they could show that private individuals could preserve the environment and keep things up and wouldn't wreck it. So I think if you're looking at that part of it, all right, so if we're going to say the Pope says we need to preserve, okay, well, let's think about this as far as a Christian, what a Christian can do for those things. Or if you think about labor, you know, Francis he tends to Marxism, right? I mean, that's 100% true. When you look at labor or servant leadership and the Southern tradition and this idea of, again, paternalism, which is often, excoriated now. It's people say paternalists, oh my gosh, you're talking about slavery. Well, I'm not, because after the war was over, you certainly had interests north and south in a type of labor relationship where you would have benefits, you would have things that you try to keep your workers happy, because happy workers do make productive workers. And the South was a leader in that in many ways. You had Bill Turner, who was head of the W.C. Bradley Company. The Bradley Company used to own Coca-Cola. It still owns Charbroil and companies like that, TSYS. You also have Aflac in Columbus, Georgia, which is certainly part of this idea of a servant leadership position. So good labor relations, and this is something that I think, again, it's more in line with this Christian charity. So I wasn't defending Pope Francis's positions on what he thinks about Marxism or all the things you talked about. It was simply looking at it, all right, is there something to this idea of Christian charity and servant leadership and some of these things that he does talk about that we could look at outside of the Pope? And I say, the Pope, what he's saying are actually some Jeffersonian things here. And so can we not look at that in these ways instead of just looking at it from the position of a Catholic Pope saying that these things are, this is what we should be doing? And that's why people were so hot about it, because I actually put that in a different way and try to bring it into the Southern tradition instead of just focusing on the Pope himself.
All right, let's go to, so we just talked about somebody who is loved by the world, and that's Pope Francis, and which is always a bad sign. If you're loved in this world, that's a bad sign. Now let's go to somebody who's despised by this world to the extent they've heard of him at all, and that's John C. Calhoun. I want to read a passage from him that you quote in your chapter, Calhoun's Definition of Conservative. And this is from a speech that he gave on the occasion of the admission of Michigan to the Union as a state in 1837. And he says, "Because I am a conservative, I am a states' rights man. I believe that in the rights of the states are to be found the only effectual means of checking the overaction of this government, to resist its tendency to concentrate all power here and to prevent a departure from the Constitution, or in case of one, to restore the government to its original simplicity and purity. State interposition, or to express it more fully, the right of a state to interpose her sovereign voice as one of the parties to our constitutional compact against the encroachments of this government, is the only means of sufficient potency to effect all this. As a conservative and a states' rights man, or, if you will have it, a nullifier, I have and shall resist all encroachments on the Constitution, whether it be the encroachment of this government on the states or the opposite, the executive on Congress or Congress on the executive. My creed is to hold both governments and the departments of each to their proper sphere, and to maintain the authority of the laws and the Constitution against all revolutionary movements." Well, okay, that is very well said. Now, in particular, if I may bring this back to current events for a moment, think once again about what we've endured with the COVID thing. Now, there was a rumor that transportation to and from Florida, or at the very least to Florida, would have been restricted by Joe Biden because of the growth of variants in Florida. And as it turns out, as the UK variant became dominant in the US, the case counts plummeted dramatically. Like all through 2021, the case counts have been plummeting. So much for the scary variants. Now, the administration denied that they were planning to do any such thing, which, of course, never believe anything until you get an official denial of it, and then they were planning it. Who could possibly oppose the idea of Governor DeSantis saying, I'm interposing the sovereign authority of the people of Florida, or I'm interposing, I beg your pardon, the state of Florida in between the unjust incursions of the federal government and the good people of this state? What would have been wrong with that? We all would have cheered him for that. Well, we should cheer him for that, not on an ad hoc basis because that one particular thing is an outrage, but because that's a great American principle.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at Calhoun, he is the American Hitler, right? I mean, you bring up John C. Calhoun, oh my gosh, then you love Hitler. This is the stupidity you get.
Even though Hitler, in his own comments on federalism, couldn't have been clearer,
right?
How he held the idea of federalism in absolute contempt. Of course, every dictator does. Hello?
Right. It's just silly. But Calhoun, and I included this because I thought that quote from John C. Calhoun was perfect. And I'm a conservative because I'm a states' rights man. I mean, this is it. It's what it comes down to. And when we've started these episodes this week, you asked me about Jeffersonian tradition. Well, there it is. And Calhoun articulates it better than most. And he says, look, if the Constitution is being violated, I'm going to stand against that, whether it's from the states or whether it's from the central authority. But in reality, the real problem was always the central authority against the states. So Calhoun's positions, anybody should stand up and cheer this. As you said, it shouldn't just be because we like what Ron DeSantis is doing because we're on the right and we want to stick it to Joe Biden. If this was a Democrat governor doing the exact same thing, I would stand up and cheer and say, thank you very much for supporting real federalism, because that's what we need to do. I mean, this is the entire process by which we need to view the Constitution, the lens through which we need to view it. So Calhoun is, you can separate the stuff, and I've always said this, you can separate Calhoun and what he said about slavery from what Calhoun said about the government. And the stuff on slavery is the most uninteresting part of his entire political career. He wasn't even unique in that. But his positions on government and his disquisition on government, on the things that he said about government, people still study these things around the world. His idea of the concurrent majority and what that should mean. That was a real thoughtful position that was based on experience on what the Constitution was doing and how it was operating. And maybe we need to think about doing something different to make it better. The United States in this way is the only place that you can't change something because it's just, well, changing it would be bad. Maybe something doesn't work well. This is why I've said the Confederate Constitution has some advantages over the U.S. model, because you had Southerners looking at the U.S. model and saying, well, here are all the things that were wrong with it. Let's change it in our current Constitution. And they did. And they made some improvements. Why can't we make improvements on the U.S. model? Why can't we actually have a discussion about some things that maybe might make it better? The concurrent majority, Calhoun's position, would make democracy better because you would have real majorities instead of just 50 plus 1% deciding what the other 50% can do. I mean, that's tyranny. Any way you define it, it's tyranny. And so Calhoun is just a wonderful political thinker. And I think the more that we have Calhoun and what Calhoun actually said on government in front of us, the more people would admire the man.
We've been talking about your book for several days now, and there are a whole bunch of essays in it. What are you most happy about with this book? What makes you the happiest, knowing that it's out there? Is it the whole thing? Or is it particular essays? Is it themes? What is it? Is it forgotten history?
I would say that just bringing this idea of Jeffersonianism forward again, and of course, people are going to buy it. A lot of them are going to already be the true believers in this, but the more ammunition you have, the better. And so when you look at what Jeffersonian means, or the Jeffersonian tradition means for America and where we are, we've just gone through this entire pandemic, quote unquote pandemic. We went through all the lockdowns. We've seen what's happened to the United States. And people are going to start thinking, this is happening. They're going to start questioning, well, why did we do this? Why did we suffer through this? Was it really even necessary? And what can come out on the other side of this? Well, you have different ideas. Of course, you have the Bernie Sanders model, which is we're going to centralize everything more, because if we had just done that, we wouldn't have had hundreds of thousands of deaths. Trump killed hundreds of thousands of people, right? So you could have that. Or we could have people being very suspicious of the center and saying, it was Fauci. It was Fauci that made all this happen. It was the CDC. It was, all these saying we need to lock down, we need to shut down. That was centralization working against us. And the states that didn't do that fared better, and the people fared better in those states. So maybe we need to think about that. So I think that what I want people to get out of this is that we have options. There's the Jeffersonian, there's options in how you can choose to live. And in my own podcast, I talk about thinking locally and acting locally. You can't go anywhere by just saying, I'm going to run for Congress. I get this all the time. What can I do? Well, I'm going to run for Congress. Why would you even do that? Why would you go run for Congress when the best thing you could do is go run for your local school board? Because we know all the things that on your program you talk about, all the different aspects of society that are just so bad. You could change a lot of these things in your city, in your school board. If you don't like the critical race theory being taught in your schools, for example, you could nix that in your school board. You could run for county office, county council, city council. You could make your city better. You could have the tax structure and other things in your city be better than what it currently is, and so that would better reflect the political environment of your town and society. So all of this Jeffersonian idea of decentralization, that's I think what I wanted to bring out in this book more than anything else. There's all kinds of examples of it from different people and different places. And if you look at, for example, the last section on the South, and I call it Southern comfort, but you look at how that works. Even the Southern tradition works within this, and the Jeffersonian tradition is certainly part of that, major part of it. So you have different things going on there, but labor, you have environment. We talked about that at the top of this program. The powers of government. These are all things that we could think about in terms of a Jeffersonian worldview.
Hey, folks, let's take a break to thank our amazing sponsor, We the People Holsters. I mean, come on now. I know you guys are all Second Amendment people. I know you're all gun guys out there. Old Woods here has a We the People holster, and so should you. We the People holsters are 100% American-made and custom-modeled to fit your exact firearm for a quick, smooth draw. And with thousands of options to choose from, plus a selection of custom-printed holsters, you're sure to find just the right fit for your lifestyle. Plus, their proprietary clip allows you to customize the cant and ride for comfortable fit you can wear all day. But that's not all. Check out their complete line of patriotic shirts, their 100% American-made tactical gun belt with the proprietary Talon buckle, and premium line of bacon jerky. Yes, you heard that right. Bacon jerky, made from 100% American patriotic pigs. So show your support for the Tom Woods Show and this great American company. Go to wethepeopleholsters.com/woods right now and take an additional $10 off with offer code WOODS10. That's wethepeopleholsters.com/woods, wethepeopleholsters.com/woods. You talked for a little while about something that happened at Washington and Lee University not long ago. What was it that happened there?
Well, there's been several things that happened there, but of course the big issue now, which I don't have in the book, is the removal of Lee from the school. It's going to be Washington University, I guess. But a while back, it was, we're going to take all the Confederate flags out of the Lee Chapel, and of course out of the tomb there. We're going to take all that down. And I think that what's happening, of course, this is the school that was established named after George Washington. It fell apart during the war, and Lee comes out of the war. He's hired as president. And he turns the school around. And Lee is, as I've said before, is a great American hero. I mean, he is. He's married into the Washington family. He lives in Arlington, which, of course, his wife is part of the Washington family. So they had the most artifacts of any person in America from Washington at the Arlington house. And so Lee was certainly familiar with the entire Washington position, the family and everything else. And so you have Lee as the natural heir at this school, and the two names should be synonymous. I mean, Washington and Lee should go together. And of course, George Washington himself admired Robert E. Lee's father. They had a very good relationship, and he very much trusted Lee's father. So I think that when you look at what's happening in Washington and Lee, it's certainly reflective of modern cancel culture, modern wokeism, to just say, well, Lee fought for slavery, and so he has to go. And you have these stupid Atlantic pieces, several of them, about Lee being a bad guy, and he's not the kindly General Lee, and all these. I've taken all that stuff apart in other places, but Lee is reflective, I think, of an older America. Lord Acton thought that. And not just that, the best parts of early America. We can disagree with things that Lee did or at the time in which he lived. We can say, well, certainly we want to bring back slavery, for example. Who would? But the fact that Lee was in many ways representative of this old Virginia gentleman code, I think, is something that we should respect out of the man. And that's what's being lost in our attacks on Robert E. Lee today.
I could go back and cite so many U.S. presidents, Democrats and Republicans alike, who had nothing but good things to say about Lee. I mean, I think this may have gone all the way down even to, if I'm remembering this right, even to Bill Clinton. It's a fairly recent thing to say Lee was a terrible person. It was just taken for granted by everybody, that you don't think this way.
Right. I mean, look, even Booker T. Washington, when asked at one point, when he was very popular in America, there was an attempt to put a Confederate monument near Tuskegee. And it was actually in a town nearby. And they needed to raise money. So the Ladies Association wrote Booker T. Washington and said, look, will you provide some money for this? And he wrote back and he said, well, I'll do something for you, but I really think that we should have statues to the best men in Southern society around the South. And that would include Robert E. Lee. He thought that these statues should represent the best people that the South offered. And Lee was certainly considered that. It didn't matter who you were. And you're right. I mean, it was, Eisenhower's most famous example when he was sent a letter asking why the guy had a portrait of Robert E. Lee. And he responded, because Lee's one of the greatest Americans we've ever had. Franklin Roosevelt said that. Teddy Roosevelt said it. I mean, it didn't matter who you were. You thought Robert E. Lee was great. And we've got this new book, Ty Seiduley's book, Robert E. Lee and Me, which is essentially a polemic against Robert E. Lee. And he went to Washington Lee, and he's one of the driving forces now behind taking Lee down. What they're doing is making Lee into, kind of a middle-class American. He didn't have great aristocratic values. He wasn't really that good. He was a bad guy. He was a slave. He whipped his slaves, all these kind of things. And there's not really much evidence of that, but they're doing it because they simply understand that if Lee is recognized as a great American, then you have to accept decentralization. I think you have to accept what independence meant. You have to accept these things as part of the American tradition. And if you take Lee out, I mean, and you go back, you look at how they're phrasing this now. Lee was a traitor. Well, that's the only way you can really take him down. He has to be the traitor, because if he wasn't the traitor, then it was just attacking him over racism or slavery. Then you have to take down George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln. But all those people have to come down too, because they were the same thing in terms of racism, or in some cases slavery. So if you're going to take Lee down because of that, then you have to take these others down. So it has to be the traitor part. And I think that's where we're going with this Jeffersonian American tradition. The Jeffersonian tradition would not recognize Lee as a traitor. They would recognize him as purely American in that way.
All right, now let's do a kind of summing up sort of question here. We've talked about the Jeffersonian tradition, what it is, who its challengers are, what the arguments are on both sides. But what shocks me is how few people in the South, which gave birth to the Jeffersonian tradition, really stand up and defend themselves when they're attacked. Believe it or not, there is more to our society than slavery. And half the things the North accuses us of, they are just as guilty of, if not more. And we have a lot of honorable people as part of our tradition we should be rightly proud of, and as decent human beings, we ought to come to their defense. So few Southerners do that. Most just roll over in the face of people who are, most of the people criticizing them are in some ways deranged or sick, or these are people who wouldn't know how to build a civilization somebody would want to live in if their lives depended on it. And yet they're going to stand in moral judgment of living Southerners today. I would think that you would just laugh these people out of court. Like, you have no standing to say anything. And not to mention, some of these are the spiritual descendants of people who throughout the 20th century were pretending that the atrocities of the Soviet Union and the communist regimes weren't happening. And they're going to render moral judgment on Robert E. Lee? This is laughable. And yet so few Southerners stand up and do anything about it. What do you think about that? I mean, aren't you from Delaware?
Right, I am.
And you're doing it.
Right. So it's embarrassing. And the reason being is because they're so afraid that they're going to get called a name. Well, they're going to call you the name anyways. I mean, how many on the left would say, well, I mean, you said some kind things about Abraham Lincoln, so I guess you're really not a bad guy. How many people do that? They never do that. Or if you say, well, I think that I say slavery is wrong. Well, okay, but you're still pro-slavery. I mean, this is what they'll do. It doesn't matter what you say. So we all know that, again, I mean, I've said this, who in the 21st century, and there's got to be some out there, but on the fringe, right? But most people in the 21st century are not going to say that they want to bring back racial segregation or slavery, and rightfully so. So why do we have to constantly defend ourselves over this? And why would we have to stand up and say, well, you defended Thomas Jefferson and he was for slavery. So what? What is productive about that argument? Let's talk about what Jefferson actually said that still means something today. Nobody said that Calhoun's positions on slavery today are relevant, but certainly his positions on government are relevant. I did a video, and it's out there at the Abbeville Institute on Calhoun, and I point this out. I mean, I give quotes. These things are what left and right would stand up and say. These are great quotes, but yet because Calhoun had this positive good speech, well, you can't like him. I mean, it's the most stupid argument you can make. It's anti-intellectual, and yet this is what we do on a regular basis. And so why Southerners won't do it? I think it's just because they're being afraid of being called a name. And of course, you've got cancel culture and everything else that could affect your career, all kinds of things. People don't like to be attacked. They simply just want to go along and get along. And I think there's a large part of that too. I don't want people to attack me. You got to have a little thick skin in this, but you're going to get attacked. They're going to do it anyways if you're political. So why would you even stoop to their level and defend yourself against something that's so stupid That it doesn't even, Eric July said this on Twitter. Why would you defend against a lie? That's just a lie. I mean, you validate what they're saying by doing that. Just say you're stupid and go on. Go on with what you're doing. I think that's really important as we think about these battles and these debates. The answer many times should just be, so what? If they were, I mean, we can't change that now, but they were still great men because of these reasons, as you pointed out, because of what they said about government, what they said about power of government, what they said about, and they wrote constitutions. They separated from the British. They won wars. I mean, these are things that are important, or they're positioning themselves as important expositors of the American tradition. We should admire that and not just simply focus on race and slavery all the time. That's the left's playbook, and they're going to win that battle every single time. You can't win if you do that.
Well, there you have it, folks. That is the correct way to think about these sorts of things. And it doesn't work, by the way, to try to use their language and say, well, they're bigots because they don't like Christianity. That does not work. That not one of them feels like, oh my gosh, my career is in danger. I've been accused of disliking Christianity. Doesn't work. You just look sad and pathetic trying it. So don't. Just stick to your guns and stand for something, and you'll be able to sleep at night at least. Well, Brian, I appreciate you taking a few days to be with us and go through some of the themes in your important new book, The Southern Tradition. I beg your pardon. I meant to say, I was thinking about the Eugene Genovese book, which he actually gave the lectures for that when I was an undergraduate, and I was in attendance at it, and all the prominent professors in the relevant fields were there, and he was just fantastic. They couldn't poke a hole in anything he said. It was great. No, the McClanahan book, which I actually think you'd get more out of, by the way, dear listener, is The Jeffersonian Tradition, and I'll link to that at tomwoods.com/1914. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me.
All right, folks, we're going to be welcoming our old friend Marco Bassani back to the show tomorrow. We're going to continue. We're going to get into some more, let's say, late 18th century and early 19th century American history. Before we wrap up for today, let me tell you about a website that you would be interested in if, like me and like most people online who have a website or a YouTube channel or something that they're trying to get traffic to, get people to see, because there's nothing more heartbreaking than pouring your heart into something and nobody sees it. If you're looking to figure out what the best ways of getting web traffic are, then the website supermikeallen.com. Super Mike Allen, Allen, ALLEN.com. He's got several free videos you can watch that go through some of the tactics that work well, that ain't going to cost you a bundle, but that do, in fact, have the result of getting eyeballs on what it is that you're doing. So take a look over there, supermikeallen.com, and we'll be back with Marco Bassani tomorrow. See you then.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.